And now, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for the evening. Patrick Whitesell is co-CEO of WME IMG, an agency that operates in more than 25 countries around the world and specializes in talent representation, commercial marketing and endorsements, brand strategy, activation and licensing, media production and distribution, and event management. Mr. Whitesell and co-CEO Ariel Emanuel orchestrated the largest talent agency merger in history in 2009 when they partnered with William Morris to form WME, the world's leading talent agency. One of Fast Company's most innovative companies, WME represents artists across film, television, music, books, theater, and digital media. In 2012, Mr. Whitesell and Emanuel forged a strategic partnership with Silver Lake, a global leader in private investments in technology, to accelerate the agency's digital and mobile growth. And in 2014, WME and Silver Lake acquired IMG, the premier sports, fashion, and media company. Now, originally from Iowa Falls, Iowa, another Midwesterner, a small town with a population of 5,200, Mr. Whitesell now represents notable Hollywood actors, including Ben Affleck, Christian Bale, Matt Damon, Idris Elba, Jennifer Garner, Hugh Jackman, Joaquin Phoenix, Ryan Reynolds, and Denzel Washington. We talked about a few Bostonians, if you can hear my accent. So Mr. Whitesell has been named one of Fast Company's most creative people in business, one of Fortune's Business Persons of the Year, and one of Sport Business Journal's 50 most influential people in sports. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for welcoming Patrick Whitesell. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, tonight, so Patrick enjoyed getting to know you a little bit, so I want to ask you some questions tonight. And I want to talk a little bit about your personal story in getting to be one of the top executives in Hollywood. I also want to talk about the role of an agent and how the business is changing, and then we'll end on a few Chicago-type questions. I can't help myself. So just to get started, tell us a little bit about what inspired you to pursue a career as a Hollywood agent, you know, coming from Iowa Falls to becoming one of the most powerful forces in Hollywood. So how did you get here?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be here, and having seen the list of people who have spoken at functions like this in the past, I'm truly humbled, so thank you for having me. Well, so I grew up in Iowa Falls, Iowa, so some of you may know what that is, but small town. And how it started, my dad was not from Iowa, nor was my mom. My mom was actually from Waukegan, Illinois. And my dad was out of World War II and the GI Bill, was going to college, and was at Duke University. And he ended up transferring to the University of Iowa because at the time they had a very successful and prolific radio program. This is the late 1940s. And he thought he might want to have a career in radio. And so starting there, my dad had a deep love for what is now movies, but at the time entertainment, theater, et cetera. And so he transferred to Iowa and was there, and he met my mom, who was 2 years younger than him. In fact, they were here in Chicago at the Drake Hotel, and that's at a thing for the University of Iowa function, and that's how they kind of met and started dating. And so he ended up going to law school to wait for my mom to graduate. And we grew up Catholic, and my parents, when my dad decided to go to law school, because the government would pay for it, and he would be able to wait for my mom to graduate, who was a pharmacy major. And when he finished law school, he went to his priest and said, I should see if I can do this, practice law. It wasn't like he had this passion for it, but he's like, shit, I've got a law degree, it's 1950, I should see if I can do this. And so his priest goes, you know what, you should go to this town called Iowa Falls. They need young lawyers there in this town. And there's about 7,000 people then. And I said, great, we're moving to Isle Falls. So he just moves there based on that. Great strategist. Gets there, there's 12 lawyers under 30 in Isle Falls. So every priest in the state of Iowa is sending them to Isle Falls. But anyway, he stayed there and he started raising a family. I have 5 older brothers. I'm the youngest of 6 boys. And so he started to actually develop a practice and was doing well. And he was actually offered a job at the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. And he kind of made a life decision to stay in Isle Falls because he loved the Midwest. He thought it was a great place to raise a family. And so he stayed. But he loved movies and entertainment. So while I was a kid, there's not a lot to do in a small town in the Midwest. And we had lucky enough to have a movie theater. We were the only movie theater in 40 miles. And we'd go there all the time. And we watched movies. And everybody in my family just had a passion for film. My dad ended up buying 2 radio stations. So my brothers and I would be DJs in the summer and play music, which I also loved. And that was where kind of like the passion came from. 3 of my older brothers, end up pursuing careers as directors and writers and have done well. And so it didn't occur to me when I went to Luther College to go work in the movie business. First of all, no one in the Midwest really goes to Hollywood, and particularly no one from small towns in Iowa goes to work in Hollywood unless you're an actor. There was an odd actor here and there. So, and I only knew those people. And so anyway, I went to Luther. I was a political science major, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to work in politics, so I moved to California because it was nice weather. My brother was living out there. And I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer. My dad goes, you definitely don't want to be a lawyer. You're right. And because I was thinking about going to law school, that's why I bring that up. And my brother, who was a director and was at the time doing really well, Roseanne and Coach, and those shows were on there, and he was directing all of them. And he goes, you should check out working in the business side or maybe being an agent. I was like, I don't even know what they do, but that sounds great. And he goes, well, you love the business, you have a passion for it, you can really work in the business. So I went out and did a bunch of interviews, and I ended up deciding, God, I'll go in the mailroom. And mailroom, even if you don't want to be an agent, is the greatest place to start working in Hollywood because you're at the center of everything and you kind of really figure out what you want to do.
Well, that's interesting. You talk about the mailroom and you hear these stories. Do you think today somebody could start in the mailroom of your company and become CEO of an agency? Is that possible in today's world?
Yes. The great thing about Hollywood, and it existed for me, being a kid from Iowa, like the hardest thing is getting hired in the mailroom, weirdly enough. It's very competitive. People with better degrees and education than me we're trying to get in, and our applicants we're inundated with applicants wanting to work in Hollywood. But if you get into the mailroom, what is awesome about Hollywood is that it's a complete meritocracy. Once you get in, and if it's all about the work and you do, you can rise to the highest levels of the business. And if you look at anybody who runs a media company today or has those jobs that you would covet, they all started in the mailroom, someone's assistant, a driver. There's a real kind of like culture of training and growing that way, and the mailroom is still a vibrant, critical piece to our development of executives.
So tell me a little bit about like a typical day. Like do you have like breakfast at Shutters with Matt and lunch with Ben? And we talked a little bit about being co-CEO. So what's a typical day for a Hollywood agent?
Okay, well, there's 2 parts of it, because there's the actual agenting, and Sarah Self's here. She's one of our partners and helps run our motion picture literary business, so I'm looking at her because she goes through this every day. But essentially, what you have is usually 2 or 3 days a week in the mornings you have meetings, which is where we all get together and we figure out, whether it's music, television, movies, all the work out there, the opportunities, what our clients want to do, what's getting made, and we share that information. And we still go about creating strategies to get people work. So those are regular. And then throughout the day, the phone is your lifeline as an agent. And in fact, you get anxiety if you're in meetings too long as an agent because you're like, I got to get on the phone and get to work. And that's where the business gets done. That's a big part of it. And then the lunches and dinners are mostly with executives in Hollywood. Hollywood, for as big as industry is actually a very, very small business. And so it's a very, very tight business. So those relationships are really important because you will work with people for 20, 30 years. And so it's not transactional at all. It's very relationship driven. And then the last piece is seeing clients. I don't spend that much time going to lunch with clients. Clients vary. Some clients are very needy and would like to spend time. But you do go visit them on sets. You go to premieres. Sarah was at a movie premiere last night in New York. So that requires you to travel and spend time with them. But most of the time you're on the phone with them quickly, just saying, here's what I read, here's what you should look at, here's where we're at, here's where we are on the deal, and just kind of updating them. And so you talk to your clients all the time, but how much you see them varies.
So what's the most challenging aspect of your job today? I mean, is it investors in earnings, or is it getting the best talent? What really do you worry about?
I think the biggest challenge or transition was when we were, with the WME IMG, and you see the E, that was Endeavor. That's where I started. Ari and I were there, and then we merged with William Morris, as Ilene was saying. But when we were the E, you could basically do everything. You could run the company and represent the clients. That became really impossible once we merged with WME, and then we went on to IMG. So really, we had to develop more into traditional CEO skill set of delegating, strategy, hiring the right people, and culture is kind of the most important thing to us. It's, I think, the thing we care the most about getting right. And we feel like we've had a lot of success with it. That's why the merger of Endeavor and William Morris worked, because no talent agency had ever successfully merged, really. So that's something we always think about. But I think the biggest transition for myself was getting away from those phone calls every day for a lot of those clients that they mentioned, letting other people into their lives to handle a lot of that, and spending more time running the combined companies.
And thinking strategically about the next move.
That's right.
So it's interesting. I read yesterday that LeBron James signed a lifetime endorsement agreement with Nike, and I'm sure Michael Jordan would have been happy to have that opportunity. So what's the role of the agent? So you're CEO, but what is the role that you would play in that type of endorsement and that opportunity, getting the player comfortable with it?
Well, in that specific, and in fact, we have an office here in Chicago, and Ira, who's out there somewhere, he runs the office or co-runs the office with us, and he does just that. And so he basically acts as the agent. You say, is the brand the right fit? Does the economics right? What is the category? What are the exclusivities? So it's no different than advising someone on a film deal. What we've found and what we love about the representation business is that as the world, and this is kind of the thesis of the company and how we've grown it, is that we saw distribution getting commoditized and becoming ubiquitous. And so in that world, when I started out as an agent, distribution was really king. And like if you weren't, when you were a kid, when I was a kid, if you weren't on ABC, NBC, CBS, you weren't on television, right? So those companies controlled the real estate. Now, you can get content anywhere, anytime, on any screen. So really what matters now is premium content and premium brands and their ability to do more. And LeBron's a good example of that, is that his value transcends so many different areas now. And that's a great place for us to sit with all those people you saw on the video, because there's more opportunity than ever for them to monetize their core business. And that's exciting for us. And our job is just to kind of stay ahead of that.
But do you think that more endorsements like that, will fee structures have to change? I know agents are paid as a percent, but when you have a lifetime deal, do you do a discounted cash flow of the future earnings?
That's a great question. No, usually what happens is when you make a deal is that when they get paid, you get paid. And so, once you make the deal, even if you don't represent that client after that, forever, you will be paid on that deal. So, that's a good thing.
Maybe I'll take some lessons from that food business. Now, one of the things I was thinking about is, this whole thing about social media and the immediate nature, and we're both checking our iPhones during dinner, and how quickly news on a celebrity circulates and videos. So what's the role of an agent in reputation management? I mean, do you give guidance to some of the talent, or some just know the best way to behave?
You definitely give guidance, but part of it is, it goes back to, we'll come to social media in a second, but just in general, part of representing any artist, but also now that with IMG, you could take the same and apply it to Wimbledon, or if there's an advertiser who we work with in our consulting business, they're very similar to artists. They have a brand that they want to protect in the world. They have certain creative work or things that they want to do. Wimbledon's very precise about what they want their tournament to look like when you walk onto the grounds, what the experience is, how much marketing is there, how much branding is there. We have a college football business where we represent 80 of the top universities, and we have Michigan and Ohio State. And those two schools, which kind of are always lumped together, couldn't be more different. If you walk into Ohio State, you will see advertising and sponsorship almost everywhere. And you go to the big house, there's nothing. And that's all about their own, and one's not right or wrong, that's their brand, there's a way in which they want to do that. That's very core to what you do as an agent. And so you're always thinking about the long term, what is this movie, what is what follows it, and then as you come into social media, it used to be a little bit more controlled, artists would come, and this is the challenge with social media as it relates to film and television, is that exclusivity and scarcity was always the commodity. So when I started the business, Tom Cruise would come out, when he had a movie, he'd go out and do a bunch of magazine covers, and when the movie came out, did a big press, and then he would disappear, and you really wouldn't read about him. There was no the tabloids really weren't what they are now. People magazines, they wrote in there, they were always kind of puff pieces. So you could disappear. And as Denzel Washington said to me one time, the advice he got as a young actor about that was, he got from Sidney Poitier. And Sidney Poitier said, well, what's the secret to long success? And he said, he goes, if they see you for free during the week, they won't pay to see you on the weekend. And so Denzel, who you don't really see anywhere except when it comes to movies, so you can really control that. Social media has changed all that now, it started with tabloid kind of journalism, like Us Weekly and those magazines when they started going after it, and I lived through it. I represented Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez at the time, and I represented both of them, and it was a nightmare. And that Us Weekly kind of phenomenon was built on the back of the Bennifer dynamic, and it was damaging because they were in the press all the time. They create a false narrative about what's really going on. The truth doesn't really have to come in play. So that came on, and then now social media has hit it, so it's instantaneous. The good news is it goes away the next day, so it's almost like there's a voracious appetite, so the shelf life is shorter. But now, with our clients, is that you have to be, for the most part, engaged socially on Twitter, on Instagram, particularly in our music business, and that is a key piece to marketing a movie or a product. Now, the great thing about that is, and this is where the disruption changes, is that, so we represent Adele and we represent Drake. So both of them released their records with no marketing. They sent out a tweet or one post, and Adele has sold more records than any record in the history, more than Michael Jackson in his heyday. And that's not spending $1. So that's massive disruption and massive power. And what's great about social media, not to get too in detail about this, but it gives a lot of control of your message to your audience. You can eliminate the third parties of that. And that's really, if you do it right, can be incredibly powerful. But it's also for the generation of talents coming up that is in their 20s, late teens or 20s, it's natural to them. They understand, they're comfortable. The hard part is getting someone, like Matt Damon does not have a Twitter account, and he never will. But the young people, it's essential piece to the puzzle.
But what does that say about the data that's available? So think about big data. Can you do research and say, Adele, the best way to get your message or your brand out there, and give her guidance?
All the time.
So where do you get the
Yeah,
data?
we spend a ton of money on research. We do it in-house. We have a great team. When I started, when we were at Endeavor, we hired one research guy. Now we have 12 people doing it full time. We spend millions of dollars on it, and it's a critical piece to it because you also got to find out how often should you tweet, what time of day should you tweet, what are the messages. You can read instantaneously the feedback of what your message is. So it's become a huge part of it.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the acquisitions, one of my favorite subjects. So when WME acquired IMG in 2014, it was $2.4 billion. So now it's, I don't know, 18 months later. So how's it going? Are you meeting the financial targets that you had? And have you changed the game plan?
So IMG, we loved it, and we're excited about the opportunity if we ever had the opportunity to buy IMG, we wanted it because IMG had a footprint in sports and fashion that you couldn't duplicate. It was global, and the combination of businesses that IMG was in was unmatched, and we couldn't figure out if you wanted to compete with them across the board, how could you do it? So, when you go in and you buy a company, and that thing was like, it's a kind of a closed auction. At the end, you go through this whole process, and then you basically put a bid in, and you're like, you hope you get it or not. There's no we're used to negotiating, and there really wasn't that. So we had to go in and basically just say, what is it worth to us, and what will we pay? And we got it we would have paid a lot more. Now, we may have not been smart about that, but we would have, at the time, we would have paid more than we did. So we were happy that we got it for $2.4 billion. In that, the actual financial goals of the company were ahead of where we thought we'd be. We're about 12 to 18 months ahead of where we think we would have been as far as the financial kind of success and profitability of the company. I think that I'd say 60% of what we thought when we bought it that was going to be the right strategy is true, and I'd say 40% has changed now that we know more about the business and the opportunities and where we should spend our time. So we're very pleased with it. And also, I think now that we feel like when you combine it with WME, when you combine the entertainment aspects of everything we touch at WME with the fashion and sports aspect at IMG, there's no company kind of like us in the world. So for our clients that we represent or people who want to be in this space, we're a phenomenal partner. And that's super exciting for us. And we think we're just getting started because Ari and I feel like we understand the IMG business. We think we have a good strategy, and mostly the integration between the two companies is working.
Has most of the original team stayed with the combined company?
Let's see. I'd say about half from IMG. Part of it was, obviously the CEO and a couple of the senior people left because basically Ari and I stepped into those jobs. But there's key business segments that we wanted to keep the people. Everybody stayed. There were some other people that we knew were going to retire and transition and stayed for a period of time. And then there was, frankly, other people that we had already had in mind to run certain segments of the business. So now we feel really great about the team we have now and who we're kind of going to battle with every day.
It's interesting that you said that you would have paid more. So I'm curious on the analysis. Do you sit around saying, well, it's 2 times revenue, what are the comps? I mean, this is what we do in manufacturing. Or was it based on future talent or synergies? Or how do you analyze a business like that?
We were probably pretty simple because, from our background, we hadn't bought a lot of companies. But we were operators. And I think that was the thing that's great about the way I came up through the mailroom and same with Ari is that we've done every job kind of that everybody's done in the company. I got the bagels. I was someone's assistant. I was a baby agent who no one would return my call. I did all that. And across our company, that's what we have. And we will jump in with our people and help solve the problem. So we felt very comfortable. What we thought was, can we run it? And we said we felt there was a lot of cost savings in the company they were easy to take out. But more importantly, we said, can we grow it over the next 5 years to this number? And we felt pretty confident after all the kind of diligence we did that we could. And those were the two driving footprints. And then we thought, after that, if we do that, this will be a home run and it'll be a really successful company. But then the platform value and the network effect of these combined companies and what will come after that, we may not know what they are now, but we think they'll be pretty cool. And that's happening. And I think that was why we were comfortable paying more. Just it was really about where we thought we could get it to in 5 years.
Now, what's interesting is you have a co-CEO role, and it's very unusual, and it doesn't always last. I know a couple of business examples we were talking about, and they didn't all last. So why does this co-CEO role work with you and Ari, and how do you see the future on that?
It's because the Emanuels are really easy people. They're just very mellow. They're kind of wallflowers, just kind of like they. You know what it was? I guess it was when Ari and I were in Denver. We just started doing it, and we're very different personalities, but we're complementary. But mostly we had, from the beginning, no ego between each other and tons of trust. And we always say about each other, there's no one I'd rather be in a foxhole with. And when times are tough, you find out who your friends are and who's going to be there for you. And there's no one who's more fiercely protective of me and vice versa of him. And so we just formed a really simple relationship. I think the biggest success of it is, again, it goes back to his lack of ego. There's no competitiveness between us. And also, we're very good now saying, you should go do this because this is actually better for your skill set, or vice versa. And so I think it's worked for us. We do look at it and say it's kind of unusual, but so far so good.
Do you have offices right next to each other, or do you have one of those double-sided desks? Or?
We used to. See, he doesn't sleep a lot, so he calls a lot in the morning early. And he always stopped now. He mostly calls like Christian and other people because he knows I just won't pick up. But no, we used to have offices kind of like on the same floor, but then we're one floor apart. We talk enough every day to...
Okay. Now, you recently acquired, I found this interesting, the Ms. Universe pageant, which was owned by Donald Trump. So explain to us how you determine an attractive event for IMG to buy. So what measures do you use to value an event like that and then make that type of decision? So part of our M&A strategy, and I would say there's two things. We bought Miss Universe and we bought professional bull riding, so PBR, which both of them, the reason why they fit for us, those go together too, right? A weekend, kind of one Friday night. But what we saw was at the core, there's 5 or 6 things that go on. One is you're putting on an event. So at IMG WME, we do about 6 events a day, and we're really good at that. 2 is there's a sponsorship component of that, and we do more sponsorship deals than any company in the world. 3, there's talent representation, and how do you protect that and nurture that, and again, that's core to what we do. There's media rights deals, which we're making all the time, and what is that worth, and what is, where should Miss Universe, what should that deal be with Fox or and the international rights. They also are, with PBR, it's going global. There's a big interest in Brazil, and weirdly enough in China. A big interest in bull riding. Then the real challenge in China is there's no bulls. So we've now shipped bulls to China to have events. So, but all of them, the point of it was all those things are, we thought these are events in PBR, a really well-run, passionate sport. And if you've ever gone to one, it is unbelievable. First of all, these guys are incredible. They get on the bulls. It's really entertaining, really passionate, niche fan base. And so we thought, okay, we can take this sport that's already doing really well and turbocharge its growth because of everything I just mentioned. With Miss Universe, we felt like this is something that we'd be good at because it needs a reboot, in our opinion. It was like, it's, and no offense to Donald Trump, but it could be a lot better, and it could be a different type of programming, and we think we're also really good at that. And so those types of things will continue to be interesting for us to pursue. Now, I also find it interesting that you sold about 1/3 of your company to Silver Lake, a private equity firm.
Yep.
What was the thinking behind that? How did it work out? And so how do you think about that now?
So we made the Silver Lake deal because, as I mentioned earlier, the distribution had changed, and we're like, wow, there's so much opportunity out here for us. But on our own balance sheet, we didn't have enough capital. We couldn't move fast enough. And frankly, we were not actually looking for a private equity partner. We were in talks with some sovereign wealth funds because we really wanted someone, a long-term investment partner who was not looking to exit. Most of the private equity deals, the terms were super onerous and wasn't worth it to us. And so we were down the road to raise capital from a sovereign wealth entity, and Egon Durbin, we had known, came down and said to us, he goes, I'd like to do the deal. And frankly, I didn't think actually we'd ever get to a deal because I thought the terms would be too onerous. But essentially, Egon made the deal that was long-term, different, and similar to the deal we're going to make with Sovereign Wealth. And he's like, I'm with you guys. And the other reason why we liked Silver Lake was that they brought tech insight and expertise that we didn't have. We're really good with content, and we're good at media, but we didn't know the tech world. And you were seeing there was this kind of frosty relationship between Silicon Valley and Hollywood, which doesn't exist now, but 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, it was like we were interested in getting paid for our content, and they weren't. They were just interested in the technology being available. Now, what you realize is that the tech companies need content, and they need proprietary content. So Egon kind of saw that, and he said, and we saw, wow, they're going to bring all this knowledge and resources around technology and relationships that we have. And that's why they've been a great partner for us.
Now, with all these deals, I understand you've gone from something like 5 offices to 200. How do you manage that? And how has life changed for you over this recent period of time?
I think that's been the biggest challenge of the multiple offices and multiple locations is the culture part and making sure everybody feels really connected to the company. And we were lucky and kind of spoiled with WME because we had 5 offices. Everybody's really connected. We have video conferences all the time, weekly. I mean, whether you're in New York or London or Nashville or LA, you feel like you're all one company. And with IMG, that's been harder. In fact, as I was telling our Chicago office, because we don't get here as often, it's harder for them to have that connection. And we work really hard at trying to figure out ways to do that. And so, the getting the culture right at IMG has been the most important kind of goal. And so that's been the trick, is like how, because you can't be everywhere, So really what you rely on is everybody understanding what your culture is and what you believe in and how you're going to do things and why it's good for them and how you're going to treat each other. And then having everybody be ambassadors to it. So like, the 2 guys who run our Chicago office do a great job of representing that to the people in the office. And I think that's been the secret to us. But it's been the thing that I worried most about when we did the acquisition, was that we got to get this right.
Now, I just saw a new report today. We're talking about this. The Directors Guild of America published a report that only 6.4% of the 376 movies released in 2013 and 2014 were directed by females. Mm-hmm. So one of my favorite subjects. So I know that there's many, Bradley Cooper's talking about sharing his salary information. So how do you think Hollywood will drive the changes that are needed? There are plenty of qualified female directors. So what do you think it's going to take to drive that number up?
It is. It's a pathetic statistic, really. And I think, and it's not that there aren't women who want to direct. Again, Ilene and I were talking about, and I was admiring her background because she was one of the first women to go to MIT, and obviously she's still a very small club of female CEOs in the world, and there's obviously tons of women capable of running these companies, so it's a similar kind of bias that exists. I think what will hopefully help, and for all filmmakers, is that filmmaking up until like 10 years ago, there's a lot of barriers to entry. Like you had to get to equipment, you had to go to film school, you couldn't just make movies. And now the whole thing's changed because everybody has even an iPhone. In fact, there was a movie at Sundance last year where they made the entire movie on an iPhone, and it looks like a real movie. So I think that the tools are now in their hands. We have to kind of figure out, and when I say we, it's the studios, it's the agencies, it's the production companies, have to push hard to give women that opportunity, particularly as filmmakers, because I think that's even more kind of egregious than it is as actors. There's been a lot of talk about the actor side of it, and I think it's different there. There are women who have made a ton of money in the movie business, and there have been really high paid, particularly in the romantic comedy genre, or certain individuals who have transcended Angelina Jolie and Jennifer Lawrence. They've made a lot of money. The thing is that there's just not enough of them, and I think what we need to do is create more movies where you're putting women in the center of them that are financially successful. The thing is, if you sell a ticket, you will get paid, right? If you can get credit for it. The thing is that most of the movies that are engineered, that are big budget, that drive a lot of salaries, are movies that typically the leads are men, and I think that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And when Angelina Jolie, I pointed out when she did Salt, that was written for a man. So, and she was obviously great in the movie and it worked out. So I think that's where the work has to be done, and it's great that people are talking about it now.
So do you think if you look 5 years from now, you see that number increasing with the different influences on it?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think, the director thing is such a poor statistic. You can only, that has to go up. That was crazy. It was even shocking to me because I knew it was going to be low, but that's really low. So, and I think studios, I think, are definitely cognizant of it now, particularly on the acting side. And so hopefully you'll see that. But in television, one of the things is majority of the great roles are for women in television. We were just talking about Claire Danes, a client of ours, and there's phenomenal roles, and they get paid really well for it as they deserve it. So, you're seeing areas where there's optimism.
So let's talk about Chicago for a minute, our favorite place. We talked about Ariel Emanuel, who's the brother of our mayor. You've probably met our mayor along the way. So what suggestions have you given our mayor about Chicago's potential for live events and sponsorships? How do we get Chicago more on the map? We have a couple of TV shows that are produced here, more and more Chicago Fire, Chicago PD. So do you have any advice for our many people in the audience?
Well, we love it. First of all, Chicago's a great town, and being from Iowa, I would come here. My brother lived here for 20 years, and so I would come every summer with my college buddies and go to Cubs weekends and games. It was great. But I would say, in Chicago specifically, we own a third of Lollapalooza, right? So WME does, and which is a phenomenal event. I think the best festival in the country. And we've talked about, can we extend that? Can we do like they do at Coachella and Stagecoach? I don't know if you guys are music fans, but Stagecoach is a country festival that goes in the same ground. So it'd be great to bring more things to Grant Park. It's a phenomenal place to do it. So we had conversations about that. Obviously, Dick Wolf, who's a client of ours, shoots all the Chicago shows here. So, part of the thing on the film side of things is about, productions are going where the rebates are. So a lot of that, movies end up in states where they can get, tax relief and financial support. And so that's why states like Louisiana and Georgia and now Pennsylvania and other places are getting a lot more films because they've made that a priority. So it's a little harder there because that's just really about math unless there's some reason to shoot there. But, Ram's great that way, and obviously, he's got Ari to bug him about it. So, but by the way, and like the Lollapalooza experience is phenomenal. When our people come here, the bands love playing it. The fans love going to it. Our people who work it love it. I mean, so it's a pretty great thing. And when Wrigley Field has all of our music artists want to play Wrigley Field and Fenway Park. So there's a lot to do and a lot to offer.
So I read also that millennials, and we do have some here tonight, are staying home and watching more Netflix and content at home as opposed to going to movie theaters. You know, how do you see that playing out, and is that a threat to your industry?
You know, I don't think it's a threat to the theatrical box office. You know, this is, the box office has been threatened from the beginning. When television started, everybody thought the movies are over, everybody's gonna stay home, right? Then when you got to the VCR, okay, that's gonna kill TV. Then the Blockbuster, you can rent movies, DVDs, et cetera. So I don't think that the theatrical box office is in trouble. And in fact, you're going to see Star Wars open next weekend and be the biggest movie probably of all time. So people are still going to the movies. Movie business is pretty simple. You make good movies, people go. And I don't think that will change because going to movies is a social experience. It's not about, you know, can I see it at home? And so and particularly for kids, they do love to still go to the movies. The question will be much more around cable and television in the way that most of us would think about it. They don't see that. They don't see the need for it. And you know, we'll have some of our young tennis clients or golf clients. They'll go to a hotel. They won't turn on the TV. They'll go on their laptop. So it's just a screen. So that's where, and I think you're seeing that's where the real pressure is going to become, which everybody's writing about ad nauseum, is the unbundling of television content and the cable bill and subscribers going away from that, and the challenge of that, because those economics, you know, everybody talks about, well, it'd be great, I just want the stuff I want. You don't, because if you watch Game of Thrones or if you watch any of these great television shows, they're really expensive, and they work because they're in that ecosystem. The moment you strip away the entire bundle, a lot of the shows don't become financially affordable to make. So it's the biggest test and challenge is going to be for the traditional television cable providers and the television content creators, how they navigate that to a world when things do become unbundled, where over the top happens. But you know, Netflix is a great additional window for us to our artists to create content. So, you know, I think it's actually it's going to be a good thing. But that migration for an ESPN, who's benefits the most from the cable system, to being the strongest brand where they could go over the top, the easiest. When they do that, how they do that, those are the things that those guys have to figure out. But I'm not worried about the traditional box office being in danger.
Good, because that's my favorite way to unwind.
Good.
Okay, so now I like to end, because we're at the end here, with what we call a lightning round. Now this is where I ask you questions, you got to give a quick answer. So I think you'll be good at this. Okay, and you can also say pass.
Pass.
Okay. Okay, what is your favorite sports team?
Green Bay Packers.
I don't know. Okay. What is your biggest, so who is your biggest sports hero?
Bart Starr.
Okay. Who is your favorite actor or actress? They may or may not be a client.
Pass.
Okay.
Thank you.
What is your all-time favorite movie?
Oh, The Godfather.
Okay. One or two?
One.
Okay. All right, and finally, what do you think will be the top movie this holiday season?
Sisters. Sarah represents,
Okay.
we represent the whole movie, so.
I can't wait.
They're opening in Star Wars. It's going to be the biggest upset of all time, yeah. Star Wars will probably do okay. I think they'll probably do okay. Yeah.
Well, we have a little bit of aspirations for that, too. So anyway, thank you, Patrick, for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
And let me, again, thank you for...
Thank you so much.
Okay.
This is great. Thank you.